Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to another edition of the Pocket Locker podcast. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast, and as always, good people, I am in airplane mode. All right, gang. So good to see y'all. We got another good show lined up for y'all. We are going to be talking about capitalism, but first, I got a little short piece for y'all on my people, black people in Atlanta, in the hotbed of HBCUs and black excellence, shucking and jiving for Donald Trump. You know we can't let that type of cooning and tap dancing pass around here. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Good to see you. Good to see you. Hey, Ember.
Hey y'all, what's up? It's Friday, so I'm gonna keep it black, but I'm gonna keep it brief. It would
Let's give
seem as
out
though
some
I've got to call
pocket
you
change.
people
Look
in
at the
again. And you people,
trees.
as in my people. Look like to me y'all didn't get enough last week, so bring that ass here, boy. Why on earth was y'all shucking and jiving down to the Chick-fil-A on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive to perform a minstrel show for Donald Trump? I know all of us seen Maya Angelou say, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. But it don't give comprehension. On the way to a fundraiser here in Buckhead, Donald Trump carried his cracking ass down to the Chick-fil-A in the West End. Now for anybody who's ever been to Atlanta, you know good and goddamn well there is no reason you should ever need to pass through the West End to get to Buckhead from Hartsfield Jackson. But he decided to stop there anyway to take pictures with the staff and give out free milkshakes to customers. I bet money he wanted to give out free chicken. But somebody on his team said, now that's a little bit too on the nose. I think that.
Can you imagine, dog? Can y'all imagine if Chunk just rolled out in front of the chicken spot with like just had fried chicken in buckets, just handed it out to black people? Yeah, one of those. You know you can't say the N word anymore. You have to say the Southern strategy. He had one. He had one of them people on the team that took care of it. But yeah, we got look at the trees in the house. We got Carrie Ann in the house. We got Ember in the house. KCA Randy's here. Good to see y'all.
Find us out if we give the inner city blacks free chicken. But it gets worse. This was a Chick-fil-A right behind the Atlanta University Center, home to Spelman.
You know I got a problem already with this because y'all know people keep doing this Chick-fil-A thing because they love how Christian Chick-fil-A is, and you know Chick-fil-A got that good chicken, but is it really worth it? I mean, is it really worth it if you have to be supporting this Christo-fascist corporation?
Morehouse, Clark Atlanta, and Morris Brown, where some of the country's brightest black minds are being molded into tomorrow's thinkers, leaders, and change agents, or so we thought.
Because look, listen. Some of y'all gotta know these schools.
Home to
Spelman,
Morehouse,
Clark
Atlanta, and Morris Brown,
and Morris Brown. That's 4 historically black colleges right there.
Some of the country's brightest black minds are being molded into tomorrow's thinkers, leaders, and change agents, or so we thought. Because baby, what the hell made you think it was okay to have a Spelman hand etched into the annals of history placed across this man's chest? And this baby is young, likely impressionable, and is literally being ostracized for this action in real life, so I will not condone or participate in bullying her. But there needs to be serious consideration that sure, Spelman College is not an institution that is decidedly Democrat or Republican, especially with this new generation looking to dismantle the two-party system, which is largely made up of college students. But also considering the fact that we just celebrated 143 years of the existence of Spelman as the maker for black women's empowerment and the academic home of several black feminist icons, what we won't do is allow that heritage to be juxtaposed next to a walking antithesis of black women's liberation.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, Spelman and Morehouse are kind of like sibling institutions. One is traditionally male, one is traditionally, or so I should say, one is traditionally for young men, and one is traditionally for young women. Both are inclusive with regards to, LGBTQ folks. And then you had the other twos there. So this, and for those people that don't know too, like, let me just say this, that all of those schools have fairly good reputations, but when you're talking about Spelman and Morehouse, you're talking about you're talking about schools that have really like kind of like elite reputations. They're kind of they're kind of in that the Ivies of sort of the HBCUs or top HBCUs or HBUCUs that are comparable to some of the most prestigious liberal arts countries in the country. So, these are definitely, these schools definitely deserve a shout out for just showing love to the HBCUs, but also people that are not as familiar with HBCUs should recognize we're talking about institutions with very serious, prestigious reputations too.
And it wasn't just her. Apparently, a young girl from Clark, Atlanta took it upon herself to say on camera, "This is Spelman, this is Clark, this is Morehouse, and this is Morris Brown, and we support you, Mr. Trump." Who is we, sister? What really?
I love this content creator. Like, her energy, her vibe is awesome, and of course, the message is on point too. She's ready for the WWE. She's ready for Word Wrestling Entertainment. Okay, she could accompany Heartbreak J to the ring any day. Okay, and the promos will be on point. I love the physical acting. I love the spitting out of the tea and all of that. She's just so on point. But look, that's what y'all gotta tell them, folks. And I know this gonna sound a little weird, y'all, but you have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. You have to be able to understand that Black people are not a monolith. And like she said, none of these institutions is explicitly Democratic or Republican. They don't maintain any sort of political affiliation. But you do have to recognize institutions that are important to Black culture, right? It doesn't mean Black people are a monolith to say that there is such thing as Black culture and Black community. And with that in mind, then you're able to think about Blackness or whiteness or any of these sort of things in the aggregate. And so it's really important to understand, like, yeah, okay, we have a diversity of opinion, but there are definitely things that represent Black interest and definitely things that are opposed to Black interest. And so, and you see a lot of people, especially, I hate to say this, but especially a lot of these racists out here, these racist apologists that like to play fucking word games, they'll try to hit you with this thing of like, oh, well, you can't speak for all Black people, and because Black people aren't a monolith, then you can't truly say something is anti-Black because what you think of as being anti-Black just reflects your opinion, and y'all can't fall for the wokey doke like that. I'm sorry, I don't know what the hell's going on with this microphone. But yeah, don't ever fall for the wokey doke like that. We can say, yes, there's a variety and a diversity of perspectives, but at the same time, we can look at what's in the interest or best for or represents Black people as a whole the best way. And we can definitely call out stuff that's anti-Black. And so when you want to say you represent your universities and you represent your communities, and then you want to say, we support you, Mr. Trump, no. Like she said, who the fuck is we? Because no, we, the collective we, maybe you support Mr. Trump as an individual. Maybe yo coon and Black ass support Trump, but no. No. And you just have to be able to recognize it doesn't matter what your political affiliation is. It does matter that you're able to call out people that are anti-Black and would do harm or otherwise remediate or repress our people. And Trump is definitely at the top of that list. He is like Captain Anti-Black. He literally represents team racism. Again, like, these are the anti-DEI, anti-woke, literally taking Black history books off the bookshelves people. Hell to the no. Okay, so I'm with her, and I'm just giving y'all a little bit of ammunition so that y'all know when y'all go out here and you see these fools acting up in the streets and you want to call out their anti-blackness, go ahead and call out their goddamn anti-blackness. And if people can't separate the difference between diversity of perspectives amongst black people at the same time being able to call out what is systematically oppressive to our people, then they just ain't on your level. They ain't ready to have a conversation with you that day. And that's a them problem.
Made me gag, as in like throw up in my mouth a little bit, was seeing more than one slide of young black women clinging to this man's person with perceivable glee. But once again, these are just kids, and we can only hope that the social ramifications of this stunt will help them learn from their actions. But the actions displayed yesterday are but a microcosm of the way a lot of y'all be acting when it comes to fame and fanfare, particularly associated with Donald Trump. Let him offer you something, and all of his atrocities go out the window. He's done the same thing at black churches. He's done it at other HBCUs. He did it with those two very misguided black women, Diamond and Silk, parading them around his 2020 campaign as his hype women. He so very obviously uses black people as pawns to siphon votes from unsuspecting populations that he suspects don't take elections seriously enough to have an opinion in the first place.
And y'all have to, Paul, and y'all got to understand too how racist that shit is. To take these people who don't represent black people, don't have black people's best interest in mind, and then utilize them as pawns and tools to curry favor with black people, to carry water for your anti-black policies. Oh, that's just as racist as it gets, right? And you see this with all their issues, right? Where they'll take fucking Caitlyn Jenner's fucking transphobic trans ass and be like, oh, look, this trans person thinks we should ban women from trans women from sports. Like, nobody gives a fuck, right? But it's the same thing. It's that same, like, find a self-hating member of the population to give you that stamp of endorsement for your policies against that group. All these women they got out here that were happy to vote, that are happy to vote against Roe v. Wade. They were happy to vote to take away women's reproductive rights. Some of them fools even talking about they'd be okay if women didn't have the right to vote. Y'all know what I'm talking about. That cooning, when they try to get somebody that represents you, that they think represents you, to turn against you, like, no. That's even worse. At least deliver racism from the perspective of white supremacy as a white person. Don't pawn your dirty work off onto black folks.
That some of you can't see that we are falling into the same trap that was laid in 2016, or that you simply do not care. And right now, today, we cannot afford to be careless with our allegiance or frivolous with its representation. Well, him being president really didn't affect me, and he was shelling out those stimulus checks, so he good in my book. Say it with me. No, he did not. It was a lie. Congress said that you needed the money, and he wanted to say, fuck y'all for real. And even if you don't care that it wasn't necessarily his idea, what you do need to know is that his ideas are the ones that are making your everyday life terrible. The whole time you worried about a check that was gone, 2 weeks later? Exhibit A, his 2017 tax bill has steadily increased taxes for anyone making less than $75,000 a year, which is why everybody you know was looking at their refunds, or lack thereof, crazy this year. Exhibit B,
and people and people don't understand this. That's the other thing too, to internalize racism, because and this is why, again, like, black people have to stop being so fucking religious, because it's like you end up literally supporting the ideas that are detrimental to your own material conditions, because you are trying to align yourself with people who don't have your interest in mind, and they never did, and they never have, and they never will. You are literally signing up to serve the cause that was brought about to make you a better slave. And I'm gonna just put it like that.
Appointed 3 conservative Supreme Court justices to the roster, and now y'all dodging the law trying to get an abortion. Women lost their reproductive rights with the overturn of Roe v. Wade. Minorities lost a supposed fair shot at higher education when they took affirmative action. Businesses have been given the right to discriminate against people on the basis of their gender and sexuality. The Voting Rights Act has been weakened, and any attempt at canceling student loan debt has been blocked at every turn. Up until recently, I guess Joe did that one thing. But they've already told you they're going for our civil rights next. And Trump has already told you if elected, he'll do everything he can to make sure it's the last election we've ever had. But you thought thought it was cute to give the backwater racists that live down the street from you even more rhetorical ammunition to support his delusions of grandeur to rid us of a free election. Public opinion can sway elections, everybody. That's quite literally how it works. That's why celebrity endorsements are so important. Yes, there are people that are always going to vote for him, and while the inverse is true as well, stunts like this not only rally his base, but can also sway undecided voters. But you know what else it does? Perhaps the most important consequence is not only having people vote for somebody who should literally be in jail, much less allowed to run, but it also influences people who know nothing about local candidates and will either make their whole ballot Republican in November or Christmas tree it. Tennessee's Senate just passed a bill allowing public school faculty and staff to carry concealed handguns instead of just getting rid of the automatic weapons. The Arizona Supreme Court just reinstated an abortion ban from 1864. This social media shit has real life consequences. We're in a time where at least 50% of adults in the United States get at least some of their news from social media. And doing something that may seem as frivolous as grabbing a photo op with Donald Trump is empowering the people across our states who have the actual factual plans and means to take away our rights and freedoms. So for those of you who feel like you don't actually have a dog in this fight and will do anything for a TV moment, I need you to think twice, 3, hell, maybe even 4 times about what you do in the public eye. Because as unserious as a place social media can be, it's time for all of us to be for real.
Yeah, that was just so on point. Just amen, sister. Amen, sister. And just call them out on it. Like, you are literally feeding them racists that live up the street exactly what they want. Yeah, I gotta go fix this curtain thing because this guy's sunlight all up. Just the sun is just blowing up my thing. But look, I ain't gonna leave y'all hanging. We're gonna jump into this. Thing we got to do today. It's time for the main event of the evening. So look, y'all. First off, go ahead and answer the question of the day. Okay. And the question of the day is, are you a non-capitalist? And I wanted to start there because I know not everybody sees themselves necessarily as a socialist or as a communist or whatever like that. But I think there is a pretty wide swath of us who recognize that capitalism does not work for most of us most of the time. And I think the idea is to start there. Start as like somebody who's at least willing to not identify with capitalism, right? That's what's crazy to me is like, we all live in a capitalist system, at least here in America, and we have to deal with capitalism. You know, and within that, you have to try to make your money and try to, advance yourself and try to, provide security for your loved ones and invest in your community. All the stuff you have to do to try to make things as best as you can. But you don't have to identify as a capitalist. You can live within the system, but recognize that it's not really serving you. It's not really a great thing. It isn't really what you would sign up for if you had choices, and be cognizant of the fact that, yeah, if given the opportunity and the means to change things, like, you'd be down to try something else. And so I'm kind of interested in how people feel about that, in the sense that a lot of us, there's a lot of baggage that comes along with these different labels, but at the same time, a lot of us recognize the system's not really working. So I don't know, y'all let me know what y'all think. But yeah, that's why I made that the question of the day. All right, I'm gonna fix this curtain real quick and we're gonna jump into this video.
Hey everyone. Before we get to the video, I just wanted to take a second to give a huge thank you to all our new patrons. 2 weeks ago, I made an announcement that the business is struggling, and the response has been overwhelming. Not just the signups, but also just the kind words and outpouring of support here, on my personal channel, and in the Discord. One more surge like that, and we can stop looking for sponsors entirely and make Second Thought a 100% grassroots funded operation. The Discord has been a blast with all the new members. In my opinion, it's the best, most wholesome political server around. If you're interested in helping make this channel completely viewer funded, consider becoming a patron. Every patron, regardless of pledge amount, gets early access to every video, plus access to the Discord. We've got everything from a book club, to live Q&As with me, to educators ready to answer any questions you may have about socialism. So once again, from the bottom of my dirty commie heart, thank you to all our wonderful patrons. It's only because of you that we're able to do this work. I hope you enjoy the video. Well, I was gonna make this a big fancy video like always, but Hakeem beat me to this particular topic, and he did a great job, so go and watch his video if you haven't already. I still do want to take a few minutes to answer this question that I get asked a lot. And by a lot, I mean this is probably the single most common question I get. What can we do? This usually comes in the form of, yeah, capitalism is bad, but what can we as individuals do to make a change? And I'm kind of giving the game away a little bit by using that particular wording, but we like that. The original idea for this video was to have a concrete answer I can link people to, because honestly I'm tired of typing out the same answer 30 times every episode. But I do think it's valuable information in its own right. Okay, so what can we do? How to answer that question? If only there were some...
Yes, Logan. Anti-capitalist definitely counts. Let me turn that up a little bit. It's Trees doesn't like capitalism. Smashing the patriarchy, anti-capitalist and pro-gift economy. All right, all right. Yeah, I want financial reparations only then. I'll pick the best side for my family and community first. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we need to get into a conversation about reparations around here sometime, because I think there's actually a number of communities that issue touches on. All right, how do you make people not greedy? Carry in. If that might be worth more than the damn cure to cancer.
Or two with that exact question as the title. The more experienced socialists among you have probably already guessed, we're going to be drawing a bit from Lenin's 1902 work, What is to be Done? This is the thing that's both frustrating and useful about questions like these. They've pretty much all been answered for the past, 100 years. It's frustrating because we've all had 100 years to realize that, and read the books, and learn from the past. And it's useful because at least the books exist to point to when people ask the same questions they've been asking for the past century. As annoying as it can be to have to keep rehashing the same arguments and citing the same resources, it's our responsibility, talking about the more experienced socialists here, it's our responsibility to help educate people who come to us with questions. And this is a big one. The answer to the question...
All right, I'm gonna just go ahead too, and give y'all an invitation to come along with me and just admit this is a topic I'm not as experienced with. I don't consider myself... I consider myself a non-capitalist or even an anti-capitalist. So not just do I not identify with capitalism, I'm pretty sure it's bad, and I'm sure it's bad, and I'd really like to get rid of it. I use terms like socialism and communism, but they're new to me, and I'm still learning about what they mean, their history, what they would mean in terms of today's economy rather than sort of the historical economies in which they were derived. And then also how we get from point A being late stage capitalism run amok and literally pretty much condemning us all to work ourselves into the ground and die penniless anyway. How do we get from there to something much more equitable? Because ultimately, I think I probably care more about the type of equity we get to, and that we use that equity in service of freedom. So what I mean by that is part of what I hate about capitalism and people's visions of the economy in general is that they're just way too work focused. I see humans as, we're animals, and what other animal do you know of that works for a living? There are some animals that do work to live, like beavers have to build a dam or some shit, but they don't have to go do some other shit to get the, you know what I mean? It's work is crazy. And are we really free if we have to work, especially if we have to work at jobs that machines can definitely do for us? So now the idea is people don't want to lose their job to a machine. It's not even that they don't want to, it's not really, if you think about what people are really saying, it's not that they don't want to lose their job to a machine, it's that they don't want to lose their income to a machine. So I'm kind of asking multiple questions at once. And we'll get into at least, I think, a couple of them here. So how do we change the economic system to make it more equitable? How do we make sure that change is in service really of our more equitable politics, at least the way I see it, right? And then how do we use emerging technologies in the service of liberating people from work? I'm not saying that like I'm a bum and I don't, I just wish but kind of like really, like, should you have to work? Because I'll tell you where it started for me. I think there's some merit. I don't know. I think anything that sounds too simple is too good to be true. But a lot of these things do help us open our doors to good ideas. So one of the things that really influenced me was the notion that in a just society or a good system, however you want to put it, you would be comfortable being like with the random luck of the draw, right? Like if you just randomly were anybody, you should be okay, right? So in a truly randomized birth lottery, not everybody's gonna be able to work. And so that's really where me starting to think of and take that seriously came from. I was like, wow, like, do I really want to live in a world where if somebody doesn't have the ability to work, they can't do basic things like just have a certain quality of life, whatever we think that standard is. And I'm and I'm gonna say some things like own a home or send their kids to decent schools and things like that. Maybe not all of that's part of the vision, but to the extent that that type of thing has been traditionally important, like I think people should be able to have them even if they don't have the ability to work. Well, then do you really want to create a system where, you know, other people are then forced to like work themselves into the ground simply because they have the physical ability to do so in order to make their living? And it's like, no, I don't really like that either. So yeah, I really do think we should have a system that our economic value isn't necessarily tied to the amount of profit we can make somebody else. I just think that system has sucked. And even for people who are compensated well in that system, they usually have to dedicate a disproportionate amount of their life to doing something they don't really want to do, just to have enough resources to do the things they do want to do. Now, obviously, if you want to fucking own a yacht and a mansion and, vacation all over the world, then yeah, you're probably going to have to do more than the minimum to have those type of resources. But I do think we should raise the floor way the fuck up. And I support things like a national minimum wage and things like that.
What can we do is multifaceted. A lot of it will depend on where you live.
Thanks,
Someone in
PC.
Russia or Somalia or
Thanks,
Indonesia
Maya.
may need to take a different approach than someone in the US, for example. It depends on the material conditions in your country. But there is one thing that has remained constant through all of history and across every single country on Earth, and that's the need to get organized. This is something that Westerners in particular seem to overlook. And it's not entirely our fault. We've been spoon-fed hyper-individualist propaganda for many, many decades. It stands to reason that we default to thinking there must be some individual course of action we each can take. And if you want to look at it that way, sure, each of us can take the individual personal step of joining a socialist organization. But we need to shift our perspective to realize that it's only through the collective power of the organization that we actually have any agency to really change things.
Now this is what's really interesting too, like, and this has come up in other contexts. We've talked about this in the context of just even representing marginalized groups and the fact that we need to move from protesting to organizing, right? Because so often as an individual, you feel some agency, protesting. You feel excited. Oh, I'm out here in the streets. I'm showing what's important to me. But after the rah-rah is over, you kind of go home and you go to bed. And a lot of people think like, well, what have we really done? What have we really accomplished? What have we really changed? Certainly, I think protesting is important, and I don't want to undermine it because it's a huge part of our expression, and it's a huge part of showing and demonstrating what is important to us and what we value. And oftentimes, protesting is the fastest, most direct way to stop something or change something in a sort of responsive sort of way. But yeah, we really do need to think more about long-term goals and how we get organized. And some people are even really thinking about being involved in the government, like running for office and things like that. The idea being that not only do we have more agency when we move collectively, but we have more agency when we also control some of the internal leverage, when we actually have a seat at the table, when we actually have our hands on the wheel. That moves that leverage even more. You know, I could tell you, for instance, like growing up, I made my bones like working with urban education reform organizations, right? And so, you know, you can think like a nonprofit that, you know, represents the interest of marginalized students, right? And is trying to fight against the corruption in the public school system. You get quickly involved in electoral politics because you realize, oh, if this person that's on our board becomes a city council member, oh, if this person that's been one of our fundraisers and leaders becomes the mayor, you understand what I'm saying to you? Like, it's way easier to get your shit through. It just is. It's just how it goes. It's just how it works. And like, everybody knows this. It's like an open secret. It's just how it works. You don't have to do the lobbying anymore. You like bypass lobbying. You literally you take people from being a part of your organization to being elected officials. You already have relationships with them. You just cut the lobbyists right out the whole fucking situation. And you see the right wing doing this great, right? That's how they come up with all this copy pasta legislation. Steph talks about it a lot because trans people are constantly getting the zone flooded with this stuff, right? There's some nonprofit organization. It throws a lot of money around in terms of electoral politics. And then when people get the seats and they get the thing and they're committed to those issues, they're turning around going, well, what should the laws look like? We don't know what the laws look like. And them same people turn around and go, here's what the law, you could use this law. Here, you could use this as a template for the law. It's the same people. And that's how the law in Virginia and the law in Maryland and the law in Vermont, they all end up looking the goddamn, because they were written by the same people. And all they did was they did a little editing. They took this state out, put that state in, made it the right code. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes they got to change the structure a little bit because states have slightly different governing structures. But that's it. We call it copy. It's literally copy and paste. We could do that too. There's literally nothing preventing our side from doing the same thing other than literally not having the organizations and the resources invested in those organizations. You know, so let's be serious about the power of this type of grassroots organizing. All right, y'all. Also, real quick, because we about halfway. We're not close to halfway through. But anyway, we're gonna hit the mode real quick. I got the whiskey right here. Hit it with the cheers. All right, let's roll tape.
For most Americans, the first thing that probably comes to mind when we talk about organizing is labor unions. Unions are an example of collective power. One worker standing up to the boss alone is likely to get fired and replaced. But an entire store? That's a different story.
Toto,
We've seen some
Dave,
incredible
Ryan,
growth
Beck,
in
good
labor
to see you.
militancy and strike actions in the US over the last few years. From teachers to doctors to auto workers, people are unionizing and fighting back against the ruling class. After all, it's only fair. We're the ones who do the work. And while it's amazing to see the victories our unions are winning, it's important to recognize that these victories are still confined to the range of possibilities that exist within capitalism. You can win better conditions at work, but a labor union under capitalism will never be able to alter the relationship between labor, the people who do the work, and capital, the people who own the means by which that work is done. That brings us back to the same question. What do we do? According to most Marxists, we also need to focus on building political organizations to work alongside and within labor unions. Let me read you an excerpt from What is to be Done. Socialism represents the working class, not in its relation to a given group of employers, but in its relation to all classes in modern society, to the state as an organized political force. Hence, it follows that socialists must not confine themselves entirely to the economic struggle. We must actively take up the political education of the working class, and the development of its political consciousness. He goes,
I love this. I love this. And y'all, just think of the potential here. We have this problem where terms like socialist and communist have been demonized. They've literally, like, there's so many right-wingers in this country, they probably literally associate those terms with Satan. The great untapped potential to improve our material conditions, y'all, in this country, in America, and it's probably true all over the world, or many places in the world, is a very simple formula, y'all. Rural plus urban equals power. Just remember that, y'all. Rural plus urban equals power. Rural people are most of the land, not a lot of people, but they generally represent most of the land, right? But most of them are also working classes. Where are people struggling to make ends meet? Rural America. Where are people underpaid, undertrained, undereducated? Rural America. Like, that's our folks. But right now, they play for the red team. The urban is concentrated landmass, most of the people. Also, that is where people are struggling to make ends meet. Cost of living is too high. People tend to be undereducated. The schools tend to be underfunded. But they play for the blue team. So what we get is rural versus urban, unfortunately, a lot of times canceling each other out. And then the 1% at the top gets to fund the political and economic classes, and they maintain all the power. But my dogs, if we did the rural people and the urban people playing for the same team, why? Because they're the working class and they're now most of the people with most of the jobs, controlling most of the land, who is not fucking around with these rich and powerful folks no more. But now we're going to be in solidarity because we are the motherfucking working class. And that's what socialism can do for us. So that should be the branding. That's what we should be talking about. No, we should be talking about socialism is how we represent the working class people across the whole board. Like, man, that shit is beautiful and it's unifying. We just got to change the messaging. And I love this. Like, it's not about you in relationship to your boss or in any particular industry, but literally the interest of the working class overall in relation to capital overall, and then taking responsibility for the political education of the working class. That has also been a big part of the problem. And I see this in education, especially with marginalized groups. So, all right, so check it. Think about what most people think about when they go to college. They think about going to college. Why? For what job they're going to get on the other side of it. So they're going to college for an economic education. They're going to college for something that's going to be able to make them money. And then oftentimes the most valued paths within the educational institution are what? Law, medicine, some shit that's gonna allow you to do capitalism and make a lot of money, you know what I'm saying? Maybe entrepreneurship, engineering, stuff where you can make stuff that's gonna contribute to the economy. We put way less emphasis on becoming a citizen of the world, becoming politically educated, understanding the historical context that we live in. All of those things we consider almost to be like soft skills. And so this is what we see, right? When you talk about, like I was saying, like where you have the rural and the poor, the rural and the urban like canceling each other out. And largely, you see a lot of people going against their own interest. It's because they don't have a political education. It's because they don't understand what their vote means, what their choices mean, the implications of policies, how our institutions really work. One of the things I loved about my school growing up, I got just a very fortunate education because in my family, in the sense, my dad is heavily involved in politics in New Jersey. So I grew up always with politicians around and literally working on campaigns and, just thinking about politics, being in meetings, being part of organizations, volunteering, interning, even when I was a little kid, y'all. So I kind of grew up around it. And then in my high school, our kind of civics and history teacher was actually an elected official. So we were kind of lucky in that regard. But yeah, I think about this a lot. And I think it can't start young enough. It really needs to start, I think, in like 3rd and 4th grade. Like when you're in elementary school, you need to be learning how the government works, what the different branches do, writing letters to your congressional people. Even in elementary school, you should be writing letters to your congressional people about things that are important to you, like getting more funding for the Girl Scouts or getting more funding for your bake sales. I don't care what you're doing, but like just practicing. It's skills. It's practicing democracy, even at a young age.
Goes on to say, the question now arises, what does political education mean? Is it sufficient to confine oneself to the propaganda of working class hostility towards autocracy? Of course not. It is not enough to explain to the workers that they are politically oppressed, any more than it was to explain to them that their interests were antagonistic to the interest of the employers. Advantage must be taken of every concrete example of this oppression for the purpose of agitation, in the same way as we began to use concrete examples of economic oppression for the purpose of agitation. And inasmuch as political oppression affects all sorts of classes in society, inasmuch as it manifests itself in various spheres of life and activity, in industrial life, civic life, in personal and family life, in religious life, etc., is it not evident that we shall not be fulfilling our task of developing the political consciousness of the workers if we do not undertake the organization of the political exposure of autocracy in all its aspects? In order to agitate over concrete examples of oppression, these examples must be exposed, in the same way it was necessary to expose factory evils in order to carry out economic agitation. Okay,
and this is part of the game that gets played too. You see this a lot where a big part of people maintaining the status quo is trying to minimize or deny the harm that it does to people. You see this with a lot of people, whether they're race deniers or Holocaust deniers, whatever it is. They're people who have a vested interest in not addressing how the system oppresses people, because they know that sense of injustice, that sense of wrong, is motivating to people, and it exists as an agitator to the system. It puts to the lie the idea that the system is working. It makes it clear that the system is oppressing. It makes it clear who's doing the oppressing and who's being oppressed. And so when you see these people get so emotional and they want to debate this stuff and they want to shout us out, and you're like, why would you even do that? Like, why are you like, I'll hear shit out here and I'll literally be like, are you trying to deny that like black people are oppressed in this country? Like, it's just crazy. Like, it's so bizarro. Where like, what do you like? What? Like, it's so weird. Like, why would you go there? Like, it's so odd. We got to remember, this is why.
Fairly clear. But to people who may be unfamiliar with some of the jargon, the gist of the text here is that while it's important to agitate within capitalist firms, say getting your local grocery store workers fired up about wage theft or showing how the boss takes advantage of workers by capping hours just below full time, it's equally, if not more important, to help them develop a political understanding of how capitalism as a whole creates all the problems they face both at work and in society at large. How the police protect the interests of capital, how the profit motive leads to crumbling infrastructure, which leads to train derailments that poison entire towns. It's all well and good to expose the evils of the boss, but we also need to expose why the boss acts the way he does. His actions are informed by the capitalist system. If we get rid of capitalism, the antagonism between boss and worker
I'll look at the
goes
bot
away.
settings later.
Okay, so you may have noticed the words agitation, propaganda, and exposure in that passage. What do these terms mean in a political setting? In a nutshell, they all serve roughly the same purpose. Agitation is the process of trying to arouse feelings of discontent, like when you're explaining how a pay raise of any less than the inflation percentage is actually a pay cut. Propaganda, which usually has a negative connotation, in this older use of the word simply means persuasive language, the same sort of thing we'd write in a high school English class, or the stuff that video essay YouTubers do. Exposure has a very particular meaning in this setting. It's used in the common sense, to reveal something that was hidden, but an exposure was also used to refer to a physical thing, like a pamphlet. Here's a passage where Lenin explains the importance of these exposures in economic agitation, specifically in Russia, but this applies to any country. Everyone knows that the spread and consolidation of the economic struggle of the Russian workers proceeded simultaneously with the creation of literature exposing economic conditions, i.e. factory and industrial conditions. These leaflets were devoted mainly to exposure of factory conditions, and very soon a passion for exposures was roused among the workers. As soon as the workers realized that the socialist circles desired to and could supply them with a new kind of leaflet that told the whole truth about their poverty-stricken lives, about their excessive toil and their lack of rights, correspondence began to pour in from the factories and workshops. This exposure literature created a tremendous sensation, not only in the particular factory exposed in the given leaflet, but in all the factories to which news of the revealed facts spread. And since the poverty and want among the workers in the various enterprises and in the various trades are much the same, the truth about the life of the workers stirred everyone. Even among the most backward workers, a veritable passion arose to get into print. A noble passion for this rudimentary form of war against the whole of the present social system, which is based upon robbery and oppression. And in the overwhelming majority of cases, these leaflets were in truth a declaration of war, because the exposures served greatly to agitate the workers. They evoked among them common demands for the removal of the most glaring outrages and roused in them a readiness to support the demands with strikes. Finally, the employers themselves were compelled to recognize the significance of these leaflets as a declaration of war. So much so that in a large number of cases, they did not even wait for the outbreak of hostilities. On more than one occasion, the mere appearance of a leaflet proved sufficient to compel an employer to concede all or part of the demands put forward. In a word, economic exposures were and remain an important lever in the economic struggle, and they will continue to retain this significance as long as there is capitalism, which makes it necessary for the workers to defend themselves. Even in the most advanced countries of Europe, it can still be seen that the exposure of abuses in some backward trade, or in some forgotten branch of domestic industry, serves as a starting point for the awakening of class consciousness, for the beginning of a trade union struggle, and for the spread of socialism. Okay, that was a long...
All right. I'm gonna let him do his thing, and his thing gonna probably be way more impressive to me because he know what he's talking about and shit. But look, there was that made me think about a lot of things that I want to just touch on before I forget. All right, so one is that made me feel so good about what we can do out here with social media. like these channels that we have, they're literally like spreading those pamphlets, and in some like tongue-in-cheek sense, I want to say like literally, y'all, this is the power of the share button, right? Like, I know there's a lot of BS out here on the internet, and we definitely get into some of that BS ourselves. See our last stream on on Christians losing their mind over a dude swallowing a sword and climbing a pole. But in all seriousness, it's like, how do I say this? Kind of like I said before, I'm still learning about this type of class consciousness and what it means to think beyond capitalism. But because people I've made community with online share these type of resources with me, like, I get more educated because I'm spend a lot of time listening to people far more educated and experienced with these issues than I am, and I learn a lot from them. Um, and then, you know, I share this stuff with you guys, which kind of brings common cause in our community that goes beyond, say, uh, whatever other issues we might share, like our non-belief or whatever. Um, and then, you know, as there are, you know, new people like always coming into the community or discovering our content, like they might be in their own process, right? Where, say, they might be just a typical case from our community. They might be like a former believer who, as part of their belief system, accepted maybe, like, let's say, a lot of conservative ideas. Now they're not just deconverting, right? But also their political ideas might be changing a lot. Okay. Now, with that, they might start to be thinking about economic issues and economic justice, right? And then they find our community and they're like, oh, these people haven't just deconverted like me. They also, you know, are moving towards like having community around, you know, a different political or social vision. Um, and then they get connected, right? And it's like easier, and it's so cool. Like that was so hard. Like, you know, it's so much easier to do that now. It's still hard in the sense that, like, you got to make community, you got to make content, and you got to make community, and neither one of those things is necessarily easy. But it's definitely doable, and I really appreciate that. And it's important that we take these little moments to reify that what we're doing matters and it's important, and that, you know, it's done thing for us, but that we definitely have the potential to um, play a role in this sort of bigger picture.
Long way of saying sharing information about capitalism in the workplace is effective, spooks the ruling class, and helps build a
What he
strike
said.
movement and favorability of socialism. The same is true today. We may not make use of physical pamphlets quite as much, but a business card with a QR code serves the same purpose. The simple act of exposing the ills of the capitalist labor landscape is often enough to start the snowball down the hill. Once that process has begun, it's critical to work within socialist organizations to pursue the political education of the working class. When
All
new
right,
socialist
pause. So this is interesting, Al. I really struggle with this. Let's say this. I'm sympathetic and empathetic of seeing the best in most people. By that I mean, I think I understand that inclination, and I certainly recognize how useful it is in terms of interpersonal relationships. Um, what I've been struggling with lately is like the effects of people, sort of realizing that so many of the things that matter to us, you know, they're not about hearts and minds. necessarily. So yeah, I don't know, right? Because I've been trying to be more realistic, and I'm like, what if that's unrealistic? You know, like what if there's a lot of bad people out there, and we're never gonna be up to the task of meeting the challenge if we don't accept and prepare for the fact that a lot of people are not good and we have to succeed in spite of them rather than trying to bring them along with us. But I don't know. I don't know. And it feels like it feels like there's a lot of bad shit happening, so there's got to be a lot of bad people to be making all this bad shit happen. But then it feels like most of the people we meet seem to be pretty good, and the ones who are not good seem to be aberrations. You know, you meet a fuckface like William Lane Craig, and you're like, oh my goodness, you're a terrible person. And you genuinely feel like, wow, I don't meet a lot of genuinely terrible people like this. But then again, the genuinely terrible people seem to be really popular and getting a lot of support. It's so complex. It's so Al, we should keep chatting about this. But yeah, it's really important. Also, then like what does it matter? Does it matter if like we need to get the most out of people? Like if we need to get the most out of people, then we do have to like assume the best because we need to get better from them. I have lots of thoughts.
Or just normal people say things like, we all know this
People
bad stuff is
suck
happening, but no
mercy.
one does anything about it.
Tsunami's dumping
That's a
cold
reflection
water on this
not
whole
on the
discussion.
average worker, but on the people who have the time and political understanding to engage in political agitation and fail to do so. Here's Lennon on the subject. Why is it that the Russian workers as yet display so little revolutionary activity in connection with the brutal way in which the police mistreat the people, in connection with the persecution of the religious sects, with the flogging of the peasantry, with the religious censorship, with the persecution of the most innocent cultural enterprises? Is it because the economic struggle does not stimulate them to this? Because such political activity does not promise palpable results? To advance this argument is merely to shift the blame onto the shoulders of others, to blame the masses of workers for our own failings. We must blame ourselves, our remoteness from the mass movement. We must blame ourselves for being unable as yet to recognize a sufficiently wide, striking, and rapid exposure of these despicable outrages. Only those who themselves go into action now can make appeals for action. And our business as socialists is to deepen, expand, and intensify political exposures and political agitation. How's it feel to be called out from 120 years in the past?
Damn.
What Lenin's talking about here is something we really struggle with today. We assume someone else is going to do the work. Someone else can organize the masses, unite the various unions, provide political education. We'll show our support when it's convenient. That's not how this works. There's no single savior. We're all responsible, all of us who are aware of the evils of capitalism. We all have to do the work. To get organized, join a socialist organization, and do the work ourselves, not as atomized individuals, but as a united front of socialists and workers. And a related issue we struggle with is that many of us put too much faith in spontaneous movements, assuming that once things get bad enough, a critical mass of people will rise up and fix everything in one glorious social movement. That's not how this works either. Think about the Black Lives Matter movement. We had a whole summer where huge numbers of people were protesting across the country, blocking traffic, confronting the servants of capital, even torching a police station. But what came of that? We got a street named after the movement, and the Democrats put on a little show. No material change came of this massive uprising because it wasn't politically organized. It didn't really even have.
Real quick, y'all. Just gotta give y'all a quick George Floyd update. I just gotta remind people, yo, not only did things not get better, y'all, things got worse, right? So, for instance, we got a Blue Lives Matter movement. We didn't even have a Blue Lives Matter movement, right? Before. You know, people have gone on harming and in some cases killing Black people without properly being held accountable since then. Even literally in the city of Minneapolis where George Floyd was murdered. We have Cop City now, right? We're still building a border wall. We're going to be getting more and more cop cities throughout the country. Most of the time, either directly or through packaging with other sort of quote unquote public safety funding. Most police budgets have ballooned since this happened, right? They've gotten more. We decided to double down on funding the police. So it's insane. So he's right. He's right, and then some. You know what I'm talking about?
Have concrete demands. There was plenty of righteous anger, which is good, but without a way to channel that into forcing specific change, it was always destined to be co-opted or fizzle out. Here's Lenin on the subject of spontaneity. Here he's talking about some recent strike movements in Russia. The fact that these strikes spread over the whole of Russia showed how deep the reviving popular movement was. And if we must speak of the spontaneous element, then of course we must admit that this strike movement bore a spontaneous character. Strikes occurred in Russia in the 1860s and 70s, as well as the first half of the 19th century. And these strikes were accompanied by the spontaneous destruction of machinery, etc. Compared with these revolts, the strikes of the 1890s might even be described as conscious. To such an extent do they mark the progress which the labor movement had made since that period. This shows that the spontaneous element, in essence, represents nothing more nor less than consciousness in its embryonic form. Even the primitive rebellions expressed the awakening of consciousness to a certain extent. The workers abandoned their age-long faith in the permanence of the system which oppressed them. They began, I shall not say to understand, but to sense the necessity of collective resistance. I'm sure you've heard the expression, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. This struggle against capitalism is about as clear an example as it gets. Large, righteous, and disorganized uprisings failed because of a lack of political vision. But the seed of understanding was there. When people ask, what can we do? This is the answer. Join organizations that are working towards building the political program necessary to unite the working class under a single banner. There is nothing we can do alone against the oppressive capitalist regimes of the world. The only thing that has ever worked in the past is the only thing that will work today. Mass mobilization and political organization. That's why the expression agitate, educate, organize is so common in socialist circles. That's the formula. I'm going to leave some resources in the description, as well as links to all the main US socialist organizations. They all have their pros and cons, they all have their problems, and God knows they all hate each other. We socialists are really good at not getting along. I've personally worked with CPUSA and DSA, but join whatever is available in your area, even if you don't agree with them on everything. It is way more valuable to get involved and start working with other socialists towards a brighter future than it is to criticize from the sidelines. Okay, that's pretty much it for this episode. Thanks for coming to my little book club. I only focused on one aspect of the struggle for socialism here. There's a lot more to it, so make sure you go check out Hakim's video as well. He's got some great advice that applies wherever you live in the world. I've also got a Discord server for my patrons where we do an actual book club, and I try to do a live Q&A every month. So if you appreciate my work, consider supporting me on Patreon. It really does help keep this operation afloat. Go get organized, and I'll see you next time.
All right, all right. Oh, I did that. Meant to do that. Boom. All right. Yeah, I appreciate that. I dropped the link so that people can actually follow up and get some of those resources if you want. Obviously, Second Thought's a great channel, so if you're not already subscribed, you definitely should be. Yeah, that was great. And I definitely am gonna consider doing that. I think that was like great advice. I'm gonna see what organizations are around where I live, or where I think I'm going next. I guess where I think I'll be, and see what I can get going. Yeah, and then I also think too, like I'm thinking about figuring out, candidates, like what candidates there are that we can support, and then also, if there's local organizations, like either a local organization unique to where you live, or maybe like your workplace or something like that. But look, appreciate y'all. This was super fun. I'm really glad we did this. It's playoff time, so we've been in Gather hanging out, watching the NBA playoffs and gaming and stuff like that. So definitely come check us out. We're having a good time. This was really, really fun. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment if you're watching later, and we'll see you next time. Thank y'all so much for tuning in, gang. Love you guys.